Good morning and welcome to the Miami Business Leaders Podcast, where we delve into the core of what matters the most to business owners. Thank you so much for tuning in today. My name is Reginald Andre, and our mission at the Miami Business Leaders Podcast is to empower, enlighten, and inspire entrepreneurs and business leaders like you by sharing insights, strategies, and real life stories from the heart of Miami's bustling business community. Whether you're just starting out or scaling to new heights in your business journey, we're here to help you through every step. So let's dive in and explore to the dynamic world of business together. And we have our special guest today, Dee Lang, and the audience goes wild.
Thank you, Andre.
How are you doing today, Dee?
I'm good. It's a pleasure to join you.
Yes. So, this is actually interesting because this is the power of networking and this is the power of relationships, because we actually met in, was it at the Kaseya Center, or where did we meet originally?
I think we originally met at the Miami Tech Coalition meeting when they had it at the Biscayne campus. I'm sorry. So when they had it at that Idea Center up there, I believe it was.
Yep.
Yeah, one of the first in-person meetings. So at the top of, it's so funny. We're almost a year out from when we met at the top of the year. We were both there in person.
Yes. And we just talked, just like any networking event, you start talking with somebody. And I remember what Dee was telling me, especially as a business owner. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. And you have such, and we're going to be getting into it. Your company just has such a particular niche that I never heard of. And back when we met back in maybe January, February, I said, Dee, I have a podcast. I'm trying to get it back up and going. And when I go back, I want you to be like one of the first people on the list. And here you are. I got the podcast finally going back, and you are number 2. So thank you so much again, Dee.
Of course. It's my pleasure to be here this morning.
Awesome. So welcome again, audience. We're going to be having a great conversation. I'm already edited so that you can now leave comments. So as we start going, I want you to make your comments, ask your questions. We want this to be very interactive. So our caption is, as we join the culture shift of 2024, and as we dive into the dynamic landscape of the workplace, you got to explore how culture shifts will shape the way we work in the year ahead. And right. Especially since we're about to be approaching the 2024 year, again, another reason why we want to talk about this, from remote collaboration to evolving leadership styles. We want to unpack the trends defining the workplace of tomorrow. So let's get it started. Tell us about Zynga. Tell us about what you do in the business in your role.
So starting off for myself, traditionally, I'm an IO psychologist by trade and education. I do consult, especially within the DEI realm heavily, which is one of the reasons WorkZynga brought me on. WorkZynga is an organization that started out as an HR tech organization. We're housed out in Nashville. We have a very large presence here, as you know, in South Florida, because I'm here. So you'll see me often at a lot of the local networking events. What we did was create a unique experience when it comes to the hiring and recruiting phase. We decided to think outside the box, outside of the ordinary assessments currently on the market, and say, how do we level the playing field? So what we did was we created a bi-directional culture fit assessment. And what that does is it looks at not only just employers, but also the candidates. We took everything candidates said that came out of the pandemic, because we know, for example, candidates now demand a super different level of transparency on all fronts. And so that means they have now new requirements of what that looks like for me to stay with this organization. And we said, how do we put that in level the playing field for an employer to understand what they're getting? Our founder loves to call it a marriage. You as an employer, you want to think about, is this a good marriage? Is this somebody that I want to keep? Are they here for 6 months or longer? And on the same token, candidates also want to understand, is this a company that's going to invest in me? Do you have what it takes to really train me on the job, to help promote me, my actual growth as my individual career, right? Because now we understand all those things matter much more than they did in the past, especially more than traditionally in the past. We've seen candidates traditionally say, what was the pay? Mm-hmm. Do you have the 401k? What were the insurance benefits and all those things? We are now moving away from that. And we certainly have been since, the pandemic, rightfully so. That's why when you mentioned, for example, flexibility when it comes to remote working, one of the number one things. There was such a huge argument, especially right after the pandemic in 2022 and top of 2023 even, or is remote work here to stay? I remember that being an argument, and I always used to tell people, it's here to stay and it's never going anywhere when you look at, the actual statistics. And it's funny because I went to a meeting with a group of lawyers at the time for somewhere I sit. And I remember them telling me, we see this happening. Our new, law students don't want to come into the office. How is that going to change? Is it going to change the culture and the dynamic? And how do we account for that? And those are some of those very same conversations we're now still going to be having and impacting 2024. And so for us here at WorkZinger, we're making sure that we can assist you and help you on the forefront when you're looking at those candidates, when you're talking about how do we make sure we both get what we need for the success and retention of this business.
I love it because I personally know that it is expensive.
It is
expensive to find somebody, be it a recruiter or just, LinkedIn or whatever the case is. You train them for 2-3 weeks.
Right.
And then after that, you realize it's not a good fit, or even worse, you train them even, and then now 2-3 months later, you realize it's not a good fit. So I, again, just thought that with the Miami business leaders, and I see we already have 28 people listening. So thank you guys so much for listening. And we're going to get right into it. So, we talked about the concept of workplace culture, and it's going to be expected to evolve in 2024. So talk about what impact this might have on employee engagement and satisfaction.
So we tapped on it just a little bit, right? You mentioned flexibility, and we have to understand that flexibility is probably going to be one of the driving shifts between flexibility and adaptability. Because what we see now is by understanding the new trends, which an organization first must start there. Let's say that, right? You clearly need to be a person, if you are in HR, a people officer, talent in recruiting, whatever that might be, you need to be on the forefront of understanding what the trends look like statistically. Because by doing so, you can be proactive. We can account for the fact that people are going to demand and say, listen, I want to be able to do my job, and I can do my job well, but that doesn't mean I need to do it in a traditional role of this 40-hour work week, 5 days a week, for example. We're moving away from that. And there's been a great debate about, do we have to do that? Can we really evolve as a society? But one thing pandemic has absolutely shown us is that I can have the capability of being from, at home in my office, for example. I can work inside of, some of the rooms that we can rent out. That has become a very big business now. Because of it is because we understand that maybe I'm not in the traditional office, but I'm getting the work done. And what science has shown us, especially as an IO, we love to look at the data because data tells us a lot. And so what it shows us here is a lot of people are more productive. I get a lot more done because I don't necessarily have those tedious office distractions. And while we might not account for those distractions, statistically, they are. How many times have you been in your office trying to write a paper and then someone knocks at the door? And then a conversation that has absolutely nothing to do with the paper you were working on starts. Now you're rambling 15, 20 minutes, however long it goes. You almost forgot where you were on that paper. God forbid, in the same moment, the phone rings and now you have to pick up the phone and, you get away from those tasks. But when you're sitting here and you're in that complete zone, I can be completely productive, get through the work, possibly even get through more work than I would have. And now I can account for those things. So we need to have people who are willing to have an open mind, right? A holistic approach, be able to understand that flexibility isn't bad. It doesn't have to be daunting. You can still have a very successful, flexible organizations while still setting boundaries, while still adopting and using, for example, the technology. We know we work heavily in the space. There's a lot of great technology out there now that we can use and adapt if you want to still keep your organization close knit. And so we have to be willing to do those things going into 24. We have to be more intentional about being inclusive and collaborating environments. And really understanding not only are we looking for diversity when it comes to the actual bodies in the seats and, diversity of thinking, but we also want to represent the diverse working styles, right? That's going to help you increase your employee engagement, increase the satisfaction, and drive your culture. Because what's going to be beneficial to your people and your employees is you're giving them back their work-life balance. And that's ultimately one of the biggest things we see come out of 2023, right? Is that work-life balance and mental well-being has been a huge pillar and a huge shift. And we did great within 2023. A lot of organizations adopted new pillars. You know, they have new initiatives around mental well being that they didn't have in the past before. I love an organization. I know, for example, I see it all the time, and it's interesting. I think my mom's on here today, but I think their organization has a great initiative going on. They actually give back, you know, time and different, you know, gift cards as part of like their mental well-being initiative. So you have different organizations who are being thought provoking, and so we need to see that going in, tying that into your actual resources and initiatives, so that we can keep everyone satisfied and engaged.
That's awesome. So let me ask you a question, because I have, for example, I know my cousin. He works for a big cruise line company,
Okay.
and the other day I was talking to him, and he loves it because he gets to be able to work from home, just like how you said. And now he doesn't have to drive all the way to downtown
Right.
Miami from Broward and do the
Right.
whole parking the garage and all of that. But then when I went to go visit him the other day, he said, okay, I saved an hour from driving to the office. I saved an
Mhm.
hour from driving back to the office, but then I still use the 2 hours to work. So talk about that as far as how to make sure that these employees do maintain that work-life balance.
So one of the biggest things is it's interesting you say that. So for me, right, I work with WorkZynga. I do independently consult, and I do have school. And I remember when it first came about, everyone thought pandemic was such a great thing. And I remember I was trapped in a box. That's how I felt.
Mhm.
I felt like I didn't know when to shut my computer down. It was just so easy for me to just walk to my desk, right? It's right here, it's accessible. Let me check an email.
Right.
You know, we all have, you know, phones. It's on my phone. I can check, I can respond. And so I had to kind of build my own myself and be accountable for myself. And now what I do is I'm very, very good at building methods to where I have a break, you know, and my breaks look like they're different. There are great resources out there that can be used, for example, on your phone. There's a lot of apps, that time management apps. I encourage you to use them if you're somebody who struggles with shutting off, because you do need to be able to work in that flow. For me, what I try to do is that periods I work in 25-minute increments, and then I walk away and take a 5-minute break. And the longer the day goes in, I increase my breaks. Maybe I'll go out, take a nice walk, get some fresh air, you know, run, get a smoothie or something, come back. And, you know, so I have to mentally build myself breaks and be accountable. I even got to the point of where I actually started having time blocks, which I do. I have time blocks to where I only have meetings. I have time blocks to where we might be taping a podcast, for example. I have time blocks to where I say, okay, this is just dedicated to school time and this is just work. And so what you want to do is have distinctive shutoffs. If you're somebody who can have a home office, I encourage you to do so, because one of the big leverages of a home office or a space is you can close that door and tell yourself, once you close that door, it's closed. Day's over. You can't go back in. Doesn't matter what the email on your phone says. It's over. You leave it there until tomorrow. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to burn out. People thought that, you know, burnout was just going to be this foreign thing because now we're at home and you have this luxury. But really and truthfully, you have other mitigating things that you're, you know, now accountable for. God forbid you're at home and your kids are home on break, right? Because we're coming up to winter break. So now what does that look like when you're juggling both? And so you have to be the person that's accountable for you, because you know the way you work best. But you also have to understand, how do I build strategic shutoffs? And so for your cousin, his best thing would be, I need to build a shutoff, because while he got his time back, maybe he needs to say, okay, in these 2 hours, I no longer drive to the office, but I can use this hour to go to the gym instead, right? And so you want to be very strategic with your time.
Awesome. That was an awesome answer. So, being that we are the Miami business leaders, we also need to talk about, leadership. And
Mhm.
leadership styles have been evolving rapidly. And so, talk about how will leadership in 2024 differ from traditional models, and what qualities will be crucial for leaders to navigate the complexities of the modern workplace. So, again, just going back to your leader, you're normally used to having your office meetings and your conference rooms, and you can pull people aside. But now, we are a worldwide economy, right? You can have people
Right.
here in South Florida, someone in Tennessee, and then someone in the Philippines. So, talk about the leadership styles and how leaders now need to evolve on that.
I think what we're going to see is we're evolving much more away from, almost in a sense, the traditional hierarchical structure, right? We're now getting into more of the collaborative leadership approaches. You're
Mhm.
going to, as a leader, need to be successful at being a mentor, at being a facilitator. We cannot have any more of these authoritative figures, to that sense of where, here's the gavel, I pound it down. No, we need to be open. You need to be empathetic, have that ability to really foster an environment that has diverse perspectives. What does that look like, and how do we use that to our advantage? Because one of the biggest things is we can sit at a seat in, a table even, and what happens when I have an opinion, and my opinion is just as good and valid when I hear your opinion in conjunction? And now we build this strategic, successful initiative. And now it also was inclusive, right? Because
Mhm.
now we included all the minds in the room, all the different perspectives. And so now we use that to our leverage and push forward. And so that's really what it's going to take. It's going to be able for you as a leader to be the person that now drives very open conversations, understand different participating styles. So you want to be very strategic in really learning your people, right? Learning what drives them, what makes them speak, what gets them excited about the work that you all do. You want to also prioritize DEI. You're definitely still going to want to do that, regardless of what the conversation in the social political climate has shown us this past in 2023. One thing that statistics tells us is when we prioritize it, we are successful outright into the bottom line. And so we want to keep that in the back of our minds going forward as well. Because what does it look like when we model inclusive practices, right? Because inclusion absolutely gets us to those bigger functions that we're looking over, less turnover, more employee engagement, like we talked about before. It gets us to all the things that marry and make a successful business. And so as a leader, you're going to have to be the person to be accountable for driving that, trickling that information down. And so it's going to be you that needs to now be the person that's accountable to change your leadership style and adapt, right? Being open and being committed to all levels of the organization. Because before, in the past, we understood it was very easy to be that authoritative figure. But
Mhm.
now, while asking you to say, okay, I need to qualify myself and my skills, to think about things like emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is going to be huge going forward.
And
Not
can you explain what that means?
so emotional intelligence, right? Understanding those actual things that are going on up here, right? Like your intellect, understanding the emotions that somebody may speak and might not speak, right? You want to think about it in just layman's terms, very, very minuscule, right? So there's a lot of things that go into emotional intelligence, and we have a couple of great certifications out there that I love when it comes to EI. So there is, if you are a person who likes to actually do webinars and participate and all those great things, a couple great resources for you for EI, for example. And you can also even follow these people if you're on LinkedIn, since we're having LinkedIn conversations. You have a couple different things. Richard Menzel is a really good person. He's a professor and doctor, amazing when it comes to EI. You also have, for example, Psychology Today. A lot of great information they've been posting about EI. You have Forbes occasionally has a couple good authors actually who post different things on EI when it comes out. And so what I want you to do is, if you are somebody in leadership, especially, a supervisor, a director, a manager, even if you're a middle manager, I think it's very important for you to understand, emotional intelligence, all that it encompasses, really, because it's going to be able that driving force, right? And so it's really your capacity to be aware and control your emotions, but also understand the next person's. And that's really important, because when we're having these conversations right now, especially in remote settings, I need to be accountable and understand how to control certain emotions. And especially because think about when we're talking about heightened topics like DEI, right? There's a lot of emotion depending on what side of the fence you might sit on, per se. And so we need to be able to navigate those conversations at a very high level. That's going to impact your leadership, as well as if you are a leader who's being challenged. Sometimes it's okay to be challenged as a leader. Sometimes leaders need to be challenged, but you need to be able to control that. And so we want to control those things. You also want to look at, cultural competency. What does that look like for your organization? What does it look like for your department and the people that you are directly over? Do you need to rethink that and reevaluate how you have set up this environment? Did you promote a healthy environment? So you have to, as a leader now going into 24, I think one of the biggest things and takeaways is to hold yourself accountable as we walk into the new year and really sit here and take away, what have I done successful? What have I done well? What do I do better?
Dee, you are dropping bars. My God, I'm trying to just I'm taking notes myself. We are recording this, but this is, and a lot of the things you're talking about as a leader, I'm looking at it and it's like, wow, this is true. I got to make sure myself, and it trickles down to my COO and then trickles down to the rest of my team, because that's one of the, and I would, as you were talking about middle management, one of the things I was thinking about is like, how often are these middle management even getting like training and hearing these things to make sure, because they're getting it from their bosses, and then they now have to shift it to the boots on the ground. But a lot of times it's like, how you say stuff and understanding, like, obviously got political stuff going on next year, and like all of this hopefully bad stuff doesn't happen, the war, and you have different now ethnics working in your company, and all of this takes into account right here. Right. And if this is not fixed, then it's going to, not fixed, but if it's not addressed, it's going to be bad for your organization. So I love what you're talking about.
So one of the things is that people forget a lot of times. I love middle management. I think I kind of favoritize them a little bit. And the reason I do so is because I understand that a lot of times, like you said, most things get lost in middle management, right? We see a lot of conversations happen in the C-suite. We come up with all these great ideas and all these great initiatives, and then we walk in and say, here's your task, right? Hold us accountable to these things that we created, but now I'm giving it to you to roll out. And what happens is, while we give them the task to roll it out, everyone under them is looking at them as the warden. So we've just made their job much more complex. Now they're looking up to us because we gave them the task, but they also have this weird perspective of being the people who looked as, the gavel kind of giver. And so when we don't give them the proper resources or the proper support or the proper training, like you just mentioned, we've already set ourselves up for failure. So could that be something else we look at going in 2024? Is making sure that we unfreeze, right? Because we've heard we heard the term in the past, that frozen middle management. So do we understand as a collective and organization that we make sure we no longer freeze middle management? And that's what I meant about saying, like, leaders, you have to be accountable to actually having open conversations, because now those middle managers should be one of the most strategic people in your conversations when you are coming up with initiatives, especially because we normally hold them accountable for passing it out.
Yep. So let's now shift over to, and I see we've had over about 150 people listening now. So this is great. We're breaking records here on the live. So thank you so much for that. So let's now shift over to the remote and hybrid work model. So as I mentioned, with my cousin, he's able to work from home sometimes. You have some people, obviously, they have to go to work. But for the remote and hybrid work models becoming more increase, how can organizations foster that sense of community and connection among employees, and just continue to ensure that vibrant workplace culture regarding a physical location? So I'm going to even ask this for myself, because, we have, I think, about 4 people here in South Florida. Then we have somebody in Jacksonville. Then we have someone in just a few other states. And this weekend, we're going to be having our company get together. And it's because it just wasn't cost effective to fly over, 4 or 5 people from other locations over to go to a restaurant. So I think we told them, hey, here's a voucher, and go have dinner with your family. But I think it's important that we still try to make sure that we're still one, and that the people that are local don't feel like they have an advantage, or the people that are remote don't think they have an advantage because, like, oh, we don't got to go to that sucky corporate party, So talk about how these different models are going to be use in 2024?
So I think that's the biggest thing we've seen being juggled since we've came into this unique new set of like remote hybrid model is how do we balance it? How do we foster this sense of community, right? While still having all these virtual spaces. And you're right, my organization operates just as you mentioned, I'm here in South Florida with you. We have people out in over in Nashville. One of our clinical psychologists, funny enough, she stays in like Lisbon 6 months out of the year. So we're literally all over. And so one of the biggest things that you have to do as an organization is be able to facilitate regular communication. Have that open communication. And I don't mean, a cell phone or, an email. What does that look like? We're in technology. And even if you are not, you want to be able to use all the great technological resources that are out there now to your advantage. One of the biggest things my team has is we have Slack, for example. And I love it, actually, to be honest, because I can send a great message. I can huddle with them. I can have all kinds of communication going. And it's funny because we even have banter going in different actual chats. We have one just for it. So kudos to team. But I encourage you to do things like that. It's have different resources that you can leverage to your advantage. There's a company called Buffer out there. They're fully remote. And one of the biggest things that we've seen them do in the past year was they do a thing where they built this great community around these virtual town halls. So every month they have the entire company together and they have what's called a virtual town hall. They also, outside of that, they were very good about creating team retreats. So something like what you just said is one of the biggest dynamics is I'm here, but I also have people away. I want them to still feel included. Well, did you understand that if you actually look for the resources, they're there to present you? There's amazing organizations. One is called Beehive, for example. Beehive actually conducts virtual team activities for organizations specifically with this problem. You can even set up a virtual zoo day, by all means, if you love animals, I do. So that your team can participate in like a virtual live zoo experience, just as a team building activity. This organization specializes in stuff specifically for your team to still be able to have like collaborative fun, because one of the things you do want to do is you want to have light events sometimes, right? Don't want to always just come together for this virtual town hall and this is a meeting and these are the numbers. No, you still want to foster that sense of community. So that means you need to have a good balance when you have these virtual meetings. And so by doing that, be very strategic. Go outside the norm, be outside the box. One of the biggest things that us being, virtual does pull us to do is be creative. And using that and leveraging, all the great technology out there. And that's going to be one of the biggest key things to success is your success is, yes, now you thought about your team. While you are having something for your locals, you still thought about something to be collaborative for those who cannot come in. One of the things that you did do is you did offer vouchers, for example. Maybe some come, maybe some don't, but you still were inclusive to making sure that you were creative to doing so. So you want to make sure you always have that well-oiled balance. But then at the same token, you definitely want to have actual meetings where you kind of bring everyone together. And by doing that, fostering different events each time.
I think, yeah. And what we've also seen is conferences where we've
Right.
Actually, yeah. So we have, for example, in our case, we're cybersecurity and IT. So there was a conference here in Hollywood at the Hard Rock. And we used that as a way for the team to get together, finally see each other in person. But then at the same time, we kind of killed two birds with one stone because then we were able to then make that a learning experience as well. So yeah, there's different ways of doing that.
Conferences are great, right? Like I conference several times a year and I love it because one of the things that does happen is now I'm able to gain that social interaction because there are people we have to understand that really do like that social interaction. They kind of need it, right? It helps push them. So sending them to the conference, for example, you get a lot of great benefits on all sides. While you get to collaborate with them, they also get to push their own, right? Now you get to saying you're investing in them because now they can go on the learning tracks, right? To increase their own personal knowledge or the different things of the benefits that are there of the conference. But then you also get to communicate at a good level, with them. And so it helps all sides of the team and in the organization as one.
Yeah. So as we start to wrap up, I want to thank everybody for watching. We still have about 10 minutes left. You are watching the Miami Business Leaders, and we have a few people saying hello. We have Sandy Prado. Thank you so much for watching. And if you have any questions for Dee, please go ahead. Now's the time. We are live. It is Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern. We are live. So go ahead and put your questions in the comments so that she can answer it. And another question that I wanted to ask you, Dee, and it's about the landscape of technology. How do you see emerging trends like AI and automation is going to influence the workplace culture, and what challenges and opportunities will they bring for employees and employers? And I'm going to also, let's just talk about ChatGPT and how that also influences, because a lot of times people just think about chat when they think AI, all they know is ChatGPT, but right. It is so much more. So love to hear your opinion on that.
I think, first off, understanding that AI is, like you said, much, much more than ChatGPT. So we are, especially from a scientific realm, we're seeing AI represented in almost every field and every sector in some way, right? Like, for example, we know ChatGPT is there, and while they're a great resource and landscape, in many ways, people use it to plan things. You can go in there and ask it questions. You can be a student. You can be a professor. There's been good and bad conversations around it. However, we see people use it from a logistical standpoint, right? So if you are aware, Amazon has one of the biggest users of AI, and they use it from a logistical standpoint in their operations. Completely transformed their operations because of AI. They actually use it to upscale their employees. They also have used it for continuous learning purposes. They are people who are even trying to use it to address ethical concerns associated with automation. So we know that it has different purposes and can serve different purposes. We also even see people, for example, when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, we've actually seen the practice of people using it for hiring. And you have what's called InclusiveBot. Actually, I think InclusiveBot is partnered with ChatGPT, now that we say that. One of the things that InclusiveBot and those different functions do is they try to actually pick out key discriminatory words in job descriptions, for example. We've actually seen people try to use it for, bias and to help get rid of, minimize that implicit biases. So we've seen AI be used for great reasons. And I know there's a lot of challenge around AI. Many people think it's either going to drive out the workforce or it's going to, have these consequences and feedbacks. One of the big things for me, I think we all have to understand is while AI can be great and beneficial and your organization should use it, and I encourage you to, however, always make sure you have someone accountable, the human, right? Because we have to understand anything built was built by a human, which means regardless if system is running on an automation pilot, there was someone physically built that, which means there is absolutely some type of bias still built in there. So there always needs to be a third eye checking it. If you're using AI to run through your job applications, right? We've seen that come out of New York. That was a very big thing with the laws at the beginning of the year. And so you want to have someone accountable to be able to say, okay, I gave this a second look. Because we understand that while AI can be good, it can also have its flaws. And so that's one of the biggest things is the biggest takeaway for AI. Absolutely use it to your advantage because it can make your job a lot easier. We've seen it successfully do so. In some ways, for example, we've seen teachers say they use ChatGPT to successfully make lesson plans. They bought back their time. I'm not upset at them using that. They use technology on their side. You simply probably needed to, mold it into what your current position or whatever it might be, but it was helpful for them. That's not a bad thing. And that doesn't take away, the workforce. We're simply getting into spaces where we now have a lot of great technology out there we should use, but be mindful of so. And one of the, we've seen examples, even you're in cybersecurity. So even better is when we've seen over the past year, we had a police department. They used an automated AI system. It was a huge story, right? Used the automated AI system. I'm going with this. And they used it to track down a suspect. The AI system 100% told them, this is your guy. He did it. They went and traveled to another state, arrested this man, and come to find out he had never even been in their state. He had never knew what they were talking about. But because the AI system told them so, they believed it, and it created an uproar. That's a good example of putting too much reliability into the system. While the system has great capabilities, right, with the great modifications that I'm sure they'll make from that instance, we also needs to be held ourselves accountable, and somebody has to be the human in the system in that third eye and making sure that we watch what we do when we use it. So if you're using it in hiring and recruiting, right, you as a recruiter or you as a talent manager, you need to appoint someone to oversee that system. You need to appoint someone to still go through and look at those key factors to make sure we aren't finding mistakes in the system or causing biases or, still discriminating in different things that are out there that are still happening when we do use AI and on occasions.
Yeah, that's what I tell my staff. I encourage them to use AI. Right. Mostly though, for if they're writing like a report or something and they just needed to pretty it up, but don't use it because you're trying to troubleshoot something and now or putting in a code and now you want to just trust that code. Please don't do that. So if you need it to work a little smarter, fine, but to use it as a crutch and a replacement, no.
Right. And that's what I tell people. I think it's one of the biggest things that you cannot put your all into. Right. It's one of those things like we should never put our all into something. You always want to be mindful to use, your skills. You're good at what you do for a reason. You're the expert in your field, and you should be thinking of that. While we always encourage, and especially in my field, I encourage the process of technologies. I love it. I work with assessment tools all day. Even with our clients here at WorkZynga, we still encourage our clients to also have a second look, right? Even outside of looking at our assessment, because that's one of the things that you always want to do is you as the human need to be in control. And so that going into 2024 is one of the biggest things that organizations certainly need to understand and marry with, is because we're seeing a lot more products, right, roll out, especially now. A lot of products are launching or, 2.0s to the previous products that we've seen. Chat GPT has even more functions I think you can even pay for now. And so because of that, we don't want to get lazy in our work. And you don't want to start missing stuff because you're relying so much on it in the field.
Yes. So thank you so much, Dee. This has been great. So let's now talk about the company, WorkZynga. So I'm a business owner.
Right.
I am up to here and looking for applications to hire. Who do I hire? Who do I, have to release in a nice way, right? You have to say that nicely. How do I make sure I don't make the mistakes? How do I make sure that I don't waste my time? And I have to have my employee shadow, and then it turns out it doesn't work. And then I got to change all the passwords, and it's just a mess. So talk about how WorkZynga helps business owners.
Being strategic from the start, right? You want to being able to really use. So our assessment tool is built off very strategic factors. It's 26, so it's very in depth. What we did is really bring together the science behind it and say, what does this candidate have? What do you have? And can they work together? And I'm by no means not saying you need a perfect match. I think people always think, I took an assessment tool. I'm not the perfect match. I'm not going to get the position. It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is what you offer, can I live with as an employer, and vice versa? Because remember, I want a little different, because a little different is going to be perspectives for innovation and creativity. But I want to also know that your differences still align with my shared goals. And so WorkZynga really does that. We highlight that for you by understanding and taking the assessment and using our assessment up front in that recruiting and that hiring phase. We really try to help you paint the clear picture, so that you're no longer doing what we know and we've seen. For example, a lot of tech companies, they hired all these great techies and they stayed 6 months and you trained them, and then they took what you trained them with and went to the next job. And how much money did you lose every time it happened? Yep. And so because of that, we're now saying, how do we get away from that? How do we put good practices in place so that we can think through this very strategic? Because one of the things that happens, and I love about our assessment, is if your organization is being very successful in this department, for example, these characteristics make an amazing tech department or amazing, HR for you. We can build those kind of profiles so that you can kind of also start hiring along those lines so that for example, going forward, these are the things I really need to look for. These are absolutely the things I need to shy away from. Kind of like you said, I need to get away from these. In that same token. And on the candidate side, it benefits the candidate as well, because not only do you just get the reports anymore, the candidate does too. So now the candidate also understands these are my strong suits, these are my weaknesses, these are the things I really want to account for going forward. And even if they don't necessarily secure the position with you, they can still use that as a learning tool and curve going forward, right, with the next organizations on their hiring journey. And so for us here at WorkZinger, we're being very strategic of building not only our assessment, but great partners, right? We just partnered with Astra, who is an actual recruiting source. And so they are able to provide people the actual talent. So they're be able to provide the seats, the people in the seats that you need. We have amazing partners when it comes to DEI solutions. And so we partner with Madeline and other different groups to make sure that we can be that resource and hub for whatever it is you might look for. We can say we got it.
Awesome. Well, Dee, this has been great. We got to do it again.
Absolutely.
You're going to push me to do it again. We've had over 400 people on this live podcast. And just imagine now the replay of this. Now, we do also have this on audio format. So I'm just going to go ahead and just put some D Lane. And the phone number is 1-844-ZINGA, ZINGA 99. And any last words before we go, Dee?
No, happy holidays, everyone. Definitely hope you have an amazing close to 2023. And I hope that everyone has a beautiful and enlightening 2024, and all the organizations were off to a great start. It's never too late.
Yes. So, Dee, again, this has been great. I know that I think the statistic is like 23% of businesses, when they hire somebody, they don't last their anniversary date. So it's a big problem that's out there, and I know that WorkZinger can help, and it's worth the cost of just making sure that you hire the right person first before anything else. So thank you everybody for commenting. Please look at the comments, and you can get Dee's information and workzinger.com. And this has been another episode of the Miami Business Leaders. My name is Reginald Andre, and when I'm not doing the Miami Business Leaders podcast, I have a cybersecurity and IT company called Arc Solvers. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.